So the risk with a uniform policy is that you'll encourage people to follow something that we may then learn is not the right way to do it, but we have everybody doing it in the same way, which could be dangerous.
Okay, we only have time for 2 final questions before I want the panel to round up the discussion. There's one in the back. Could you stand up and just speak up?
Yep. Well, I have 2 questions. Firstly, you said that bubbles distort the indicators of fair value, and that therefore market participants can't judge what the fair value is. How are then central banks supposed to be able to? I guess that implies that central banks cannot judge whether there's a bubble either, and then they sort of need to act against when there's rapid growth. But booms are a lot more popular than busts, and that seems to be reflected in the way that the Federal Reserve has acted. How do you correct the incentives of the central bank so they cease to be so asymmetrical? And secondly, oftentimes the solution to one crisis plants the seed for the next crisis. If the central bank management now starts focusing less on inflation, is there a risk then that could lead to the expectation anchor being weakened, and that leading to maybe sometime in the future getting back to 1970s style inflation?
Okay, right. To address that, I make a point in the book that the 3 classes of variables: the macroeconomic variables, the income variables, and the balance sheet variables. They are all effectively worse than useless for identifying these crises coming. There is one class of variable that is useful for identifying when we're getting these problems coming, and that's the monetary variables, the credit creation variables. How much debt is there in the economy? And that we do need to be able to measure correctly, and that's why the off-balance sheet financing, the shadow banking system is so dangerous, because they can't measure it. And this is why I think the ECB is correct in having its second pillar of monetary policy, the M3 measure, effectively. And it's why the Federal Reserve is wrong in explicitly rejecting the need for that measure. So I do think there are variables. I'm not saying this is easy. It's a very difficult thing to do. But I think there are variables that could give and do give some insight into these problems. And let's remember, it is not like this crisis has come out of thin air. There were plenty of people predicting it, based largely on those debt levels. The second part of your question, when I say we should move to a focus on asset prices and credit for guiding the banks, does that run a risk that they then miss something else? Yes, that's precisely, again, coming back to my comment earlier on Goodhart's law, that's precisely why I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive, because I believe the economy is a fundamentally adaptive animal, and the policies needed to deal with that need to be fundamentally adaptive. So we've been too prescriptive by focusing narrowly on CPI. I wouldn't want to make it too prescriptive by then coming up with another measure, and then have somebody here standing giving a speech in 100 years' time and saying, wasn't that a daft idea? So we need a little bit of flexibility and pragmatism in this.
All right. Would you like to make some final comments, Professor, or
yes.
Are you comfortable?
Yeah. I'm comfortable, but I still would like to say a few words. I think that now the central bank here has got a bit too much of the blame. I think that clearly the regulation has been problematic, and part of that is also due to the financial system, because in some situations regulators have tried to improve the regulations, but they have been unable to carry it through because of opposition from the financial institutions. And I also think that that the financial institutions they have done a bad job overall. Not all financial institutions have done a bad job, but overall they have done a bad job, and they're taking too much and too much risk, and they have earned a lot of money while they've been doing that. So I think it's in some sense wrong now to put all the blame on the central bank. And I think that one reason why the central bank underestimated the risk that everything went wrong was that they didn't really believe that this financial system could undertake all this risk. So I think that some of the risk that one has taken in this financial system is just it's hard to understand and believe. For instance, like these institutions that insure credit default swaps, they have, according to IMF, only 1% on what they have insured. They have have money to pay. So I mean, if the loss is more than 1%, they have not enough money. So I don't understand how people could buy insurance of institutions that don't have more than 1% to cover this. I think briefly on the credit variables as a target. I think the problem is that the credit has grown a lot for the last 20 years, so we will have stopped the boom 15 years ago, and oh, that is not good, because then we have lost a lot of growth. I mean, the economy world economy has had 2 good decades, more or less, and that would be too bad. So I think that one should focus more on the real economy and better regulation and more supervision of the financial institutions. I think that is more.
Last comment. I agree with Mr. Holden here that there has been some pretty bad incentive structures in the financial markets that we should address. But I also agree with what Cooper writes in his book, that a lot of what you see going on in financial markets during booms are very symptomatic of credit bubbles. I disagree with Holden that you would have lost growth, because I think you would have more sustainable growth. And I don't think there should be a goal for society to have as much growth as possible in the short run. I think the emphasis should be on sustainability and also on a stable monetary framework. And lastly, I would say that I believe that the time has come to abolish the inflation targeting, and that we should start thinking about a new framework for monetary policy, and also a framework that does not include using monetary policy for Keynesian style fine-tuning. Thank you.
Would you like a final short comment, or should we wrap it up?
I'll
Because
just
we've
make
gone 5 minutes over.
one final comment, and that is that I do quite strongly believe that it's not a matter of if we have more cycles earlier and we'd stopped this boom 15 years ago, that we would be in a worse situation now. I think it is a more sustainable path that we're looking for here, and perhaps smaller cycles will ultimately be more sustainable than these mega cycles that we've got.